Well, thank heavens for Trusk, for the breakdown, the rupture of Elon Musk and Donald Trump. It's foreshadowed everything, even week 3 of the hysteria over the superannuation tax hike, which is actually just the clawing back of a concession already given to wealthy people. We're dealing with just 0.4% of the population, but wow, haven't we heard about it every day? Oh, the tears. The Oz and the AFR wringing their hands every day. And Matty Canavan, of course, the National Senator, Matt came out and said that the Nats will continue to fight to the death. There you go, Matt. Here they're going to continue to fight to the death to help a few of Australia's richest people not pay as much tax. Anyway, he also said this week, Matty Canavan, that it was time to end net zero. That's a broken record. And make coal great again. The Libs were talking about how to make the Liberal Party great again, but we've done enough of that. 3 weeks of the aftermath of a federal election, so we thought we'd take a little bit of a different tack today and go state by state, mate versus mate. There was a bit going on federally as usual. I mean, Timmy Wilson came out and told Sarah Ferguson on ABC 7:30 report that he was happy to lead from the front or the back. Good on you, Tim. The AFR, the domestic gas reservation policy, now that the government has started speaking about it, the obvious solution to energy prices, letting Australians use a little bit more of their own gas rather than exporting 85% of it. But of course, it was a crisis and we're waiting to see how the gas lobby got its message out. We didn't have to wait very long. Here was the headline in the AFR. The domestic gas reservation policy will not get us over the valley of death. Valley of death. You wanted them sitting around with a whiteboard coming up through the shadow, though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death. And valley of death gets used a lot in the AFR. In fact, they use it all the time for everything. Oh, there was a bit from the RBA of, well, they came out and further evidence the Australian economy again in per capita recession, basically flatlining. Soggy GDP figures came out midweek to show the Australian economy wasn't in particularly good shape. So interest rates, we got it wrong by about 75 basis points so far. Too slow on the way up and too slow on the way down, cutting rates. But there were some ructions, there was some real action going on in the States. Tasmania. There was a crisis in Tasmanian Parliament. Here they were. The budget, which some people were calling the worst budget in state history. There was a no-confidence motion against the Liberal government of Jeremy Rockcliffe, and he went down. He was defeated. It's in a parlous state. Here they are. They blitzed $330 million on their big hydrogen project, which hasn't worked out. And they're still under pressure from the AFL to spend $1 billion building a stadium. The AFL said it might tip in a bit, but they want the Tasmanians to build $1 billion stadium in a state where adult literacy is beneath 50%. And a homeless man was found this week dead in a rubbish tip. I think they could probably spend the money on better things or get the AFL to pay for it to get their Tasmanian Devils up. In Victoria, meanwhile, Jacinta Allen, who's under huge pressure, $22 billion in costs they've got to axe out of the budget somehow. But unlike Jeremy Rockcliffe in Tasmania, she has plenty of seats. There can be no confidence motion in Victoria. 2 reports were disclosed with Parliament in WA this week. One was an investigation by the Auditor General into the local government. There was not much evidence for it. It was just a bit of a vibe. Oh, but the news went big. News that an investigation by the Auditor General found councils have been spending big on fancy dinners and champagne will rightly outrage ratepayers. But it probably won't surprise them. They love having a crack at the local councils, the old WA Inc. But the other report, which didn't really see the light of day, was this one. Also tabled by the Auditor General in the WA Parliament on the same day as this other report, was called Fraud Risks in Land Transactions by Development WA. Development WA is basically the state government entity which develops land. The OAG forensic audit found that the WA government-owned Development WA is selling and developing land, and it made these findings. Sells our state-owned land to developers for less than its value, has process irregularities, or as a hard word, irregularities, that indicate fraud, corruption, or misconduct, cannot demonstrate value for money from public land sales, has questionable checks and balances, does not have supporting documentation for over 30% of 242 reviewed sales. Land was sold at unapproved sale prices, 50% lower than most recent valuation. How sus is that? And the investigation disclosed insufficient details relating to conflicts of interest, gifts, benefits, invitations, and hospitality. No coverage there. In Queensland, it was business as usual because Premier David Crisafulli was busy as usual cracking down on the youth crime epidemic. There's only one thing in Queensland, that's the youth crime epidemic. That's epidemic. On and on and on about that. And in New South Wales, there's only one thing, of course, that's mansions, property prices, and the great marvelling at the shortness of the most recent downturn in property prices and house prices. Mansions are on the up again. The property porn is flowing thick and fast in the SMH and the other media. On the share market, we've got an IPO coming up. Virgin Australia, which the government, of course, should have just taken a stake in it and then floated it themselves for billions in profit. But instead of doing that, I actually like South Australia this week, which announced that it wouldn't be taking equity in Whyalla Steelworks, so just give them money. Just give them money. Give them taxpayers' money. Anyway, Virgin, they leaked a little line of the Fin Review. We're doing some $3,000 worth of shares for all employees in Virgin. We're told, said the AFR, that some 95% of the company's 8,000 staff are eligible. They'll hold 1,000 shares each and a bit, representing roughly 20 million of Virgin's outstanding shares. But, said the AFR, quite rightly, the Transport Workers Union should have demanded more, because that means that there's some $160 million being carved up by management, by the private equiteers, the cuff-linked buccaneers. They're sharing $160 million, but they let staff have $20 million. Good for liquidity in the shares. There you go. That's just the way of the world. It's South Australia, of course. The other story was, of course, good old Sam Maiden, the high-profile, hard-hitting news.com.au News Corp journalist. There was a huge kerfuffle amongst the, what should we call them, the intelligentsia. Sam wrote a big piece because what they did, they banned her from going on Soir. She was going to give a talk at On Soir, which is a Sydney University student newspaper. But unfortunately, wrote Sam, in a very long and hard-hitting piece, she'd been brutally cancelled by the student body there, who no longer wanted her to speak because of Palestine and News Corp, and so she had been cancelled. And, what a yarn. Back in the day when Sam and Penny Wong and Joe Dyer and all these, the glitterati of the intelligentsia in South Australia, and here she was suddenly being cancelled by a Sydney student newspaper. It's a good 1,000-worder in that one. That was pretty good. But I think what we're going to have to do this week is give the gong to WA Inc. No state is closer to its corporations and media than WA Inc., than the government of WA. Business as usual, hiding the big stories and extolling the small stories. So come on down, WA Inc. Well done. You have won Scam of the Week. Please like, share and comment in the section below. Help us out on Patreon if you can afford it. And we'll catch you on the next round. We've got some big stuff in the pipeline.